Welcome back to part 3 of The Debt Collector, our final part. Enjoy. Chapter 9. Bargaining with Darkness. Days passed, though they felt like years. For the first times he couldn't get the hang of it, but eventually he adapted to the days that repeated themselves. James felt, despite the few days he'd spent searching for his son, that he was growing significantly older somehow. Not in terms of appearance, but he felt sure his vitality was being drained somehow. The police investigation into Ethan's disappearance yielded nothing but dead ends. Rebecca became a shell of herself, her want spirit dimmed by grief and fear. James, racked with guilt, couldn't bring himself to confess what he knew. The whispers returned each night, growing louder, more insistent. They mocked him, reminding him of the deal he'd made. The shadows in the house deepened, moving in unnatural ways, as if they were alive and watching. James knew he couldn't keep silent any longer. He returned to the park where he'd first met Victor Crow, clutching a hastily written note begging for an audience. He placed it on the same bench where they'd spoken, hoping the strange man would hear his desperate plea. That night, as the house lay silent, James awoke to the faint smell of sulphur. He opened his eyes to find Victor standing at the foot of his bed, impeccably dressed as always, his expression one of mild amusement. "You called," Victor said, his tone smooth and mocking. James scrambled out of bed, his heart hammering in his chest. "You took my son, bring him back." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Took? No, James, I merely collected what was owed. A transaction, nothing more." James clenched his fists. "You never said it would cost my family." Victor's smile widened, his teeth gleaming unnaturally in the dim light. "Did you bother to ask?" He gestured casually, the shadows around him twisting and writhing. "You were desperate, and desperation blinds men to the fine print." James dropped to his knees. "Please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please, I'll do anything. Just give him back." Victor studied him for a long moment, then sighed theatrically. "Anything, you say? Well, there is one option." James's head snapped up. "What is it?" "I'll do it." Victor's grin turned cruel. "A trade, your life for his." James's stomach dropped, but he didn't hesitate. "Yes, take me instead," Victor chuckled darkly. "Oh, James, it's never that simple. You see, I don't want just your life, I want your soul. Forever, no peace, no rest, an eternity of servitude." James faltered, the weight of Victor's words crashing over him. But the image of Ethan, his bright eyes, his laughter, burned in his mind. "Fine," he whispered. "You have my soul. Just bring him back." Victor clapped his hands, the sound reverberating unnaturally through the room. "Excellent. The contract is sealed." A sudden gust of wind whipped through the house, extinguishing every light. When the darkness receded, Victor was gone. Chapter 10. The Price of Redemption. The next morning, James found Ethan asleep in his bed, clutching his stuffed bear. The boy's face was serene, his chest rising and falling with soft breaths, as if he'd never been gone. James let out a choked sob and scooped his son into his arms. "Daddy," Ethan murmured groggily. "It's okay, buddy," James whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I've got you. You're safe now." Rebecca burst into the room moments later, her eyes widening as she saw Ethan. She threw herself onto the bed, wrapping them both in a trembling embrace. "Where did you go? What happened?" she sobbed, but Ethan only shook his head. "I don't remember," the boy said softly. "There was a shadow, but then it was gone." James held them tightly, his relief tempered by the grim knowledge of what he had sacrificed to make this moment possible. The days that followed should have brought peace, but for James they were tainted by an unshakable dread. The whispers and shadows were gone, but he could feel Victor's mark lingering in the air, as if the man's presence had soaked into the very walls of the house. One evening, while sorting through the stack of overdue bills and legal notices that had consumed his life before, James noticed something strange. The documents, the ones he hadn't yet destroyed, were no longer stamped with final notice or overdue. Instead, they bore a new seal, one he didn't recognize, a faint swirling insignia resembling an Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its own tail. His heart raced as he shuffled through them. All the paperwork had the same mark. His bank statements, his mortgage agreement, even Ethan's birth certificate. "What is this?" he muttered, flipping frantically through the pages. A low chuckle echoed behind him. James froze, the blood draining from his face. Slowly he turned to find Victor Crow standing in the doorway, his sharp suit as immaculate as ever. "Enjoying your second chance?" Victor asked, his voice dripping with mockery. James's breath caught in his throat. "You said it was done. I gave you what you wanted." "Why are you here?" Victor stepped forward, his movements unnervingly smooth. "Oh, James, did you really think it was that simple?" He gestured toward the paperwork. "You didn't read the fine print, did you?" James shook his head, backing away. "What do you mean? I agreed to give you my soul." "That was the deal." Victor's smile turned razor-sharp. "Indeed, but the contract is binding not just to you." The words hit James like a blow. "What? What are you saying?" Victor leaned in, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Your sacrifice ensured Ethan's return, yes. But your soul, it's not yours alone. It's tied to your bloodline, James. Your son, his children, and their children, they all belong to me now. An eternity of servitude passed from one generation to the next." James's knees buckled, his world spinning. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You can't." "Oh, but I can," Victor said, his tone almost cheerful. "You didn't think I'd give you a fortune and a family reunion without insuring my investment, did you? Consider it generational wealth." James lunged at him, but Victor vanished into the shadows, his laughter lingering like smoke in the air. In the following days, James descended into a frantic spiral. He pored over every document, but it was useless. The seal that cursed Ouroboros was everywhere. His house, his accounts, even his identity, everything had been altered, bound to Victor's terms. There was no escape, no legal recourse. The truth sank into James's bones like a poison. He had been tricked. The contract he had signed had not just bound him, but all of his descendants to Victor's dark claim. James couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Each time he looked at Ethan, his son's innocent smile became a symbol of the cost he'd paid. What was he going to tell Rebecca? How could he explain the twisted fate he had dragged their family into? One night, in a moment of desperation, James returned to the park, the bench where he had first met him. Victor stood alone under the flickering street light. He felt an irrational urge to confront the man again, to beg, to scream, to do anything to break the chains that had bound him. But as he approached the bench, something was different, something felt off. The air itself seemed charged with a strange energy. Victor appeared as if summoned by James's despair. His figure materialized from the shadows, grinning with an unsettling calm. "Did you really think you could cheat the system, James?" Victor's voice was low, almost sorrowful. "You were never in control. It was always a matter of when, not if." James shook his head, fury and fear warring within him. "I gave you my soul, I gave you everything. Why my family, why my son?" Victor's eyes narrowed, his expression growing darker. "Because you were the one who made the deal. You were the one who thought you could bargain your way out of it. But the price is always paid, and it's always more than you expect." "I'll find a way out, "You will never escape," Victor interrupted, stepping closer. His voice carried a finality, like the closing of a coffin lid. "And neither will your son. You think I took him for nothing? I didn't just return him to you, James. I took what was mine, and I left you with a gift. A curse that will travel through the bloodline. Ethan's children will owe the debt, and their children after them. A never-ending cycle." James staggered back, his mind reeling. "No, no, you can't. I'll fix this. I'll stop it." Victor's laugh cut through the night, sharp and cruel. "You can't undo what's been done. The price is eternal, and you will pay it for the rest of your days." Suddenly the ground beneath James's feet seemed to tremble, and he staggered as if the earth itself was rejecting him. His vision blurred, the edges of the world distorting. The trees around him seemed to warp and bend, their shadows stretching unnaturally toward him. And then, in a horrific flash of insight, James understood. Victor hadn't just taken his soul, or Ethan's future, he had trapped them both in an endless loop, a cycle of debt that would never cease. Victor didn't need his soul. He had trapped James in something worse, a prison of eternal guilt, of endless cycles where the next generation would always suffer as the price of the one before it. James dropped to his knees, unable to breathe, unable to fight the realization. This was the true cost. Victor watched him, his eyes cold and calculating. You made a choice. Now your family is mine forever. With that, Victor's figure began to fade into the shadows. James's last words were a desperate cry, I'm sorry. The darkness swallowed him whole, and as it did, he understood the final twist. The bargain wasn't over. It had never been. The curse didn't just mark his bloodline, it marked him for eternity. For the rest of his life, he would see his son grow, marry, have children, and then the cycle would begin again. Each time the price would increase until one day there would be no more descendants left to pay. James was not just the debtor. He was the keeper of the debt, and no one would ever be free. The end, or epilogue. Hell has a dress code. James sat in his dimly lit living room, surrounded by the remnants of his shattered life. The crumpled black envelope lay on the coffee table, a grim reminder of the choices he had made. Ethan was safe now, sound asleep upstairs, but James couldn't shake the weight of his guilt. He'd nearly destroyed his family, and the cost, though seemingly settled, felt far from over. The knock at the door came just after midnight. It was soft yet insistent, like a polite but inevitable invitation. James opened it cautiously, his heart pounding. Victor Crow stood on the doorstep, as impeccably dressed as ever in his tailored suit. But this time he wasn't alone. Beside Victor stood a tall, imposing figure with slicked-back hair and eyes like burning coals. He carried a briefcase made of scorched leather, and his expression was one of mild annoyance, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. "Good evening, James," Victor said smoothly, his trademark grin firmly in place. "May we come in?" James hesitated, but something in the other man's gaze told him resistance was pointless. He stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Victor gestured to his companion. "This is Mobius, our department's legal counsel." Mobius gave a curt nod, charmed, I'm sure. "Let's skip the pleasantries. We're here to finalize a rather unorthodox arrangement." James blinked, utterly lost. "Arrangement? What are you talking about? I thought everything was settled." Victor smirked, but didn't respond. Instead, Mobius set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it with a click. Inside was a molten metal pen glowing faintly and a yellowed piece of parchment, its edges charred as if by fire. "As per Clause 17 of Victor's employment contract," Mobius began, his voice dry and formal, "he is obligated to offer gainful employment to any debtor who demonstrates genuine remorse for their actions and an improved understanding of generational accountability." James frowned. "What does that mean?" Victor sighed, clearly unamused. "It means that despite my better judgment, you've impressed someone higher up. Congratulations, James. You've earned yourself a job." "A job?" James repeated, baffled. Mobius straightened, adjusting his tie. "Yes, you'll be joining our acquisitions department as a negotiator. Official title, Acquisitions Negotiator, Mortality Division. You'll be responsible for managing new contracts, liaising with clients, and ensuring compliance with infernal regulations." James stared at them, trying to process what he was hearing. "I don't understand. What about the debt?" "What about Ethan?" Mobius raised a hand. "As part of this arrangement, your outstanding debt, including the unfortunate bloodline interest, will be cleared in full. Consider it a one-time payment in exchange for the remainder of your mortal life in our service. Additionally, as you've accrued credit for a year's worth of pain and suffering, your contract will include some perks." "Perks?" James asked weakly. Victor rolled his eyes. "Yes, perks. Full dental, excellent health insurance, access to both mortal and infernal offices, and," he added with a sharp grin, "we're fully compliant with HMRC, so you won't have to worry about taxes." "Wait, why me?" James asked, his voice rising. "Why are you doing this? What's the catch?" Mobius clasped his hands behind his back. "No catch, just necessity. We're understaffed." "Understaffed?" Mobius sighed, clearly tired of the explanation. "Yes, many of our veteran negotiators have completed their mandatory 1,000-year cycles in Hellside and are opting for reincarnation. Something about wanting to experience the rapture firsthand. It's apparently a popular vacation for the damned. Regardless, we're short on experienced personnel, and you're adequate." Victor smirked. "Think of it as late-stage capitalism, but infernal." James rubbed his temples, overwhelmed. "And Rebecca, Ethan, what about them?" Mobius slid the parchment toward him. Your mortal obligations remain intact. You'll work a standard 9 to 5 schedule to avoid raising suspicion. Your wages will be garnished for the next 3 years to settle your earthly debts, but your family will be cared for. They'll never know, James hesitated, staring at the parchment. The fine print seemed to shimmer and shift, but he didn't need to read it. This was the only way out. Mobius handed him the molten metal pen, its heat strangely soothing. Sign here. James didn't think twice. He scrawled his name across the parchment, the letters glowing briefly before sinking into the page. The moment he finished, the parchment rolled itself up and vanished in a puff of smoke. In its place, a jade necklace appeared in James's hand, the pendant shaped like an Ouroboros. Victor gestured to it. Your access key to Hellside. Don't lose it, it's expensive to replace. James looked at the necklace, then back at them. So that's it? I just work for you now. Mobius snapped his briefcase shut. Welcome to the team. Orientation begins Monday. Don't be late, Victor chuckled. Oh, and James? You might want to brush up on your negotiation skills. Some of our clients are less agreeable than others. Mobius and Victor turned to leave, the air around them shimmering faintly with heat. At the door, Mobius paused and glanced back. Remember, he said, his voice almost kind, even in hell there are rules, and now you're one of us. The door closed behind them, leaving James alone in the silent house. He stared down at the necklace in his hand, its jade surface cool against his palm. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a small, bitter laugh. Even hell couldn't escape late-stage capitalism. The end. This was the third and final part of The Debt Collector. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.